Thanks for sticking around with us online. We have a few things more than a few that we weren't able to talk about, but I think first it would be only fair, since we're online, to see what people said online.
You know, lots of both sides. I mean, it really got to be a sort of heated debate, you know, on Twitter. And
on one particular topic?
On Common Core.
Okay.
I mean, this has really reached, you know, I'd say 50-50, you know, but, you know, it's a recent tweet, and someone, you know, says, stop worrying about Singapore. How do you get city schools performing like Clayton? And that's a pretty direct, bold, you know, statement towards, you know, how do you do it?
So I'll put that back to you. You're saying we should look at London. Should we just look at
St. Louis Black Leadership Roundtable a few years ago developed 4 essentials and 4 desirables in terms of school turnaround. That high quality, well-paid, effective teachers in every classroom. That there be a meaningful, long-term relationship between an empowered adult and every child in that school, that the principal be tasked as the chief education officer, the instructional leader, solely responsible for staff development and student learning, period. And that there be an effective utilization of technology, and with that, that becomes a starting point. Next steps, the 4 desirables, would be culturally competent staff. Next, using testing, very much like Common Core for diagnostic purposes, to see where the gaps are, because Black children can learn, Black children do learn, but they start the race with a number of high hurdles in terms of obstacles, educational deficits, the deficits that poverty and the other, housing, other factors that implement it, and you know, facilities and equipment that are conducive to 21st century learning. With that, you begin to level the playing field, and those children will excel. The children in Normandy will excel. The children in Riverview will excel. If, as the voluntary transfer program has shown in some instances, you begin children at the kindergarten level with equal level of resources, parent engagement, it's there because in order to be involved in the VIC program, a parent has to enroll you, has to make sure that you get to the bus very early in the morning, has to ensure that someone's there to pick you up. So the family engagement piece is there, although they may not be able to get to the district. And that begins the learning continuum where there's a culture, both in St. Louis Public, in Normandy and Riverview, you know, that culture for love of learning.
When we talk about, in that example, the children in St. Louis or Normandy or Riverview Gardens should be learning the same as the children in Clayton. To me, it starts with a relationship between a student and a teacher, a highly qualified teacher, but a teacher. And you know, we have this obsession with testing, and yes, it can be used for diagnostic purposes, but far too often it's not used for diagnostic purposes, and it's used as a punitive measure. We need to make testing and assessment part of the instructional process, and not be so, you know, consumed with testing that we forget about instruction. You know, I was joking that the old Missouri expression, you know, you can't fatten the pig by weighing it. We keep weighing the pig and weighing the pig and weighing the pig.
That's funny. I seem to get fatter the more I weigh.
And we're not giving, in this case, the students, the rich nutrients of a good curriculum and good teachers who are not stressed about all this stuff. So I go back to what we ended with. My comment, is this accountability process of state accreditation, has it sort of gone haywire to the point? I understand the idea of continuous improvement, and I agree with that. We should be raising the benchmark. But it's like every year we change it, and there's no comparability from this year to last year because we're using different criteria this year.
But I think we have to be fair about some things. First of all, it doesn't change every year. It changes about every 5 years. This is the 5th cycle. And I do think that time does dictate for us to begin increasing our own standards. We don't want to be held to the same standards we were held to 20 years ago. The world is a very different place. And I do think that you're right spot on about that relationship between the teacher and the student. And school districts like Clayton are exceptional at attracting high quality teachers. And we ought to be looking at what they do well and assuring that we can transfer that information across school districts as well. So those back office administrative functions are important too.
Is what they do well have more money to spend?
Yeah, can we transfer
Their per pupil
socioeconomics
is
across all levels?
$19,000.
You know, absolutely. And should we be looking at how we can provide additional resources where they're needed? Yes. We also should be looking at how we can unleash the innovation of these educators. I mean, one of the things Barrett and I talked a little bit about too is that some kids are going to need more time. And so why is it that first grade is only 1 year? If we really need to make sure that children really don't get pushed on without having the things they need, then let's give them the time. There's nothing wrong with saying you're going to spend not 2 years in first grade, but we're going to make sure that you have everything you need in order to be successful at the next
can you
level.
make a radical? Okay, so let's say that's one thing that it could be a solution. Can you make a radical change to our education system like that? I mean, we're hearing.
KIPP does it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We do it
Longer
now.
school days, longer school years, more time with teachers
KIPP
building those
is-
relationships.
KIPP is.
KIPP is
It's a charter school, so fifth grade through eighth grade. So they're not taking children in at their early years. They're really taking children who are multiple years behind, and through using time, using rigor, and they really do use time.
We're talking about a paradigm shift.
Absolutely. But there's nothing to say right now in Missouri law that you can't have 2 years of first grade. And we could do that right now. Any school district in Missouri could say, you know what, my kids are going to need the time. Now, I'm not talking about making a child go through the same grade twice, but making sure that they have the sufficient time they need to be able to get to the place that is important, that threshold to learn. That's happening in classrooms where you have multiple grades. Sticks in the City Garden Montessori are places in which they allow children the time to stay.
More affluent parents are doing that on purpose to give their kids an advantage.
And in both of those cases, we have low-income, high free and reduced lunch populations.
The other issue is the Commissioner of Education in Missouri, Krista Castro, has a very ambitious program called, I think, Top 10 by 2020. And that's great. You know, I love having, ambitious goals like that. But we are something like 47th out of 50 states in funding for education. So when you talk about the differences between the Claytons and the St. Louis and the Normandy and Riverview Gardens, also has to do with the way we fund schools, our over-reliance on the property taxes, and the state just doesn't, the foundation formula, which is supposed to bring all districts up to at least some basic level, has not been fully funded. I don't know when. It hasn't ever been, to my knowledge. So we're not putting the amount, we're stressing out about all this accountability and testing, the testing obsession, and we're ignoring, what could be one of the fundamental issues, and that is the disparity in funding and resources between and among these districts.
Well, you have to look at Riverview, Normandy as well. We have one of the highest foreclosure rates that there is in Missouri and St. Louis and whatnot. That does factor. I mean, we can't brush over it. It's a factor.
That's money you're not getting right there.
Absolutely.
That's based
I
on
mean, so property
tax.
taxes, they're not. It's not happening.
Yeah, and the
That's
other
not the
impact
case.
with that is the mobility that comes with foreclosure because you're having families move. And if you look at Normandy, I mean, fully 1/6 of our student population comes a month after school starts. Okay, so like last year, we had 500 students by the end of school that were not on our rolls by count day. Now let's just understand what that means, because we're not always sure, okay, so which district are you coming from, what's your background, how many times have you moved? There was a couple of families that I know of where within that year they had moved 3 separate times, okay, so there's a level of PTSD that ends up coming from that, okay? But then there's also the emotional instability of everyone involved in that family because of the moves that happen with that. And so you talk about we have about a 55% mobility rate. So that impacts things. That's why it's important to have partnerships where we're looking at how do we stabilize families. That's really important. And it does not negate the fact that you need to have strong teaching, that you need to have high standards, but you also need to let's look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's make sure kids are fed, let's make sure they're safe, let's make sure they can be stable.
We have over 500 kids who are kids in transition who are homeless.
And that's
And
true.
Clayton does not have that.
Absolutely. And we know that. right? So then let us, as the people who are running school districts or in classrooms or governing school boards or funding school systems, do something about it. We can reorganize ourselves. If we know that kids are not coming for a month, what else can you do differently about it? How can you use time differently? What do you do to create an awareness of when school starts? We had a huge back to school effort in St. Louis that has really paid off. If you know that you have so many children who are going to be in a mobile situation, then what can you do about partnerships with neighboring districts? How can you create a way in which you can help stabilize that child? Stay in that school, sweetie, and then we'll make sure that you finish the year out. That's where the adults come in. We cannot use poverty as an excuse not to excel in public education.
Absolutely. I will tell you, he said earlier that this transfer program or the transferring that's happening right now, there's so many unintended consequences that are happening, but there is a positive that's happening out of it too. Our community has bound together, the partnering with all the different school districts. We're partnering with Kirkwood. We're really using each other, our resources with each other, and really coming together. And we're not excited about where we're at, but we're excited because we know that we will be accredited because of all the things that we're doing with the community, with the ministers, with the small businesses.
Why did it
Barry,
take?
don't start another show.
No, I'm just saying, why did it take the transfer issue for this to happen? Why have we not been having this conversation for 20 years?
Dr. Quaker, because we're about
No,
to run out of our
all I
stream.
wanted to say was why isn't this assessed at all? Like these efforts are really time intensive, really challenging, really complex for these school districts to engage in, and we don't assess it at all. We use some different measures, some external measure to count it, but we don't count the quality of the partnership, the challenge that the partnership takes, quantitative and qualitative of these partnerships. That doesn't square anywhere in this.
They're gonna cut off in mid-sentence. Let me give Philip the last word. Just give us a takeaway, because you left the board meeting to come here, and then.
How do we plan for this stuff?
Okay, how do we plan for this?
Well,
stuff?
I just think that what's going on with the transfer program, as Barrett would say, means that we can really take some really deep looks into what we need to change education for kids, and understand that education is a developmental process, and we need to approach it developmentally, and that's what's going to empower the process.
Okay, we got to leave it there. I'm sorry, because we don't want to cut us off mid-sentence on the stream. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Casey.
Thanks for watching. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.